Elevate your happy hour at the Library of Congress, which is open late on Thursdays for Live at the Library. Enjoy cocktails in the iconic Thomas Jefferson Building alongside live music, author talks, exhibits, and more. It's all free, eclectic, and inspired by the library's collections. On deck for August are outdoor film screenings, a K-pop night, and folk concert with Amanda Pascali. Plan your next night out at loc.gov/live. Today on CityCast DC, George Pelecanos is maybe the greatest Washington novelist of our time, and he never, ever writes about, like, the Senate. Over the years, his crime stories have doubled as a kind of history of our city, and his most recent novel, The Blue Flame, drops today. I talked with Pelecanos about growing up in the city, about working on The Wire, and about where he finds his stories. I had a great time, and I hope you'll stick around and listen. Today is Tuesday, August 4th. I'm Michael Schaefer. Here's what DC is talking about. Hi, George. Welcome.
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to have you here today because in so many ways you are like the poet laureate of DC. I don't think I could think of a writer more entwined with the hometown Washington. And you have a new book out this month, The Blue Flame, which is a detective novel featuring your private investigator, Derek Strange. We will get to him. But first, I want to talk about the beginning of your career. You and I both grew up in DC. What drew you to writing about this city? You know, there are like sort of Washington novels, and a lot of them are about senators and stuff. That is not the world you chose to write about.
Correct. Really, when I started in the early 90s, there weren't those kinds of books being published about the working class people of Washington who've been here for generations. I saw a hole there, and I really just wanted to write one book. I didn't envision an entire career, but as I got into it, I started seeing a big panoramic look at Washington through the years with characters that reappear in other people's books and things of that nature. You know, the real answer is that I come from an immigrant family. My dad was born in Greece. We lived with my grandparents who were born in Greece. And the family, they loved Washington. They were very excited to live here and grow up here. You know, it was a big deal then to be an American and be proud of being in the seat of power. And my grandmother never made it past the 5th grade, I think, but she knew every president in order.
Where did you guys live?
When I was a kid, we lived in Mount Pleasant,
Mm-hmm.
in my grandparents' house on Irving Street. And so that sort of love for the city bled into me. And when I started working in my dad's place, he had a diner at 19th and Jefferson. My job was to deliver food around the city on foot. I was 11 years old. This was 1968, right? Right after the riots.
Right. Big
What
year.
an exciting time for a kid to be out on the street in DuPont Circle. All these things were happening, and I was just into it, man. And I wanted to write about it someday. I really wanted to make movies. That was my ambition. I didn't know enough about, you know, how to be an author or anything like that, but I knew I wanted to tell stories about Washington someday, and that's where it all comes from.
See, you know, like I like to think of myself as a sophisticated reader. I've traveled, all that. And yet when I read even at the first page of your newest novel, there we are at 9th and Upshur. And I'm like, I've been there. And, you know, there's Curtis Chevrolet getting mentioned, or Wheaton Plaza. There are a lot of other people who grew up in Washington or anywhere else and wanted to focus on the heights of society. What was it about these sort of regular corners where the regular people live, where what I like to call lowercase w Washington? What attracted you to that? I mean, you could have gotten curious about the power forces.
But I just never had any interest in that.
Yeah.
You know, I've never written about politics in my books. I've never set anything down at the Capitol or over at the Pentagon.
Mm-hmm.
I just have no interest in that. And like I said, those people that I write about have been criminally underrepresented in American literature. You know,
Hmm.
I see heroism in a guy who is a dishwasher, goes to work every day with no really hope for any big reward or smashing success. I find that very heroic, you know?
Your whole shelf of books kind of doubles also as a history of modern Washington. You have set books in all these different decades. So we see sort of white flight, urban desolation, the crack epidemic, gentrification. Of these eras that you have sort of traveled through and lived through, was there one you found most sort of the richest dramatically, or that you find yourself returning to because you want to understand it?
Well, the my big book was Hard Revolution. It's about
Hmm.
the 68 riots. And, you know, that's the pivotal event in modern Washington history. Everything changed from there. And there's actually two things that happened. In 76, the metro opened up,
Yeah.
and that completely, Washington was slowly but completely reborn with the advent of public transportation. Every place that there was a metro station, a garden grew up around it. And that's why modern Washington is the way it is. So I think the 60s and the 70s, yes, is the richest fodder for me. And it's something I keep going back to.
As a child of the 80s, I was really turned on to King Suckerman too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a popular book. And it's a book that just came very easily because I was 19 in 76,
Hmm.
the bicentennial. I mean, I remember everything. I didn't have to do any research for that book at all. I just remember it very clearly. Yeah.
The Metro, I think you're right. It changed a great deal of the city. But the change was like not entirely a good change for a lot of the sorts of people and sorts of neighborhoods you write about.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to it, right?
Of course.
People were displaced, um, and you know, developers got rich. Citizens didn't really get rich, although you know their property values increased,
Yeah.
and a lot of people sold their homes for quite a bit of money and moved on. The one thing that I will say about that is, if you look at the riot corridors, 14th Street, 7th Street, and 8th Street, for many, many years, you know, you take H Street because there's no metro on H Street, right? That was the last to come around.
There was a streetcar.
There was a streetcar, yeah, the ill-fated streetcar. And 25 years ago, when you went down that street, it was the lights were out, right? But the lights are on now in all those businesses, and you have to look at it this way: those are people working in all those places. It created a lot of jobs.
Yeah. One of the things critics often say about you, and it, given that the central divide of our city is race, you're a white guy who writes convincingly and complicatedly black characters, white characters, all sorts of characters. Um, Tell me about like your experience writing about people whose lives or experiences in Washington are so different from your own. How much of your characters are based on people you know, and how much are sort of pulled out of the air?
I'll tell you, most of them are based on people I know. I mean,
Hmm.
I just don't have that kind of mind that I can um, imagine people that I haven't met or the kinds of people that I've met. And I do a lot of research, but the one thing that I think I do well is I listen to people.
Hmm.
And the paramount, you know, thing that I go by is respect everybody. You know, respect people. Don't be lazy. Don't have a character talk a certain way because they're black.
Hmm.
Think about who this character is. And let's say you go to a wedding and it's mostly black people there. If you close your eyes in that room, you're going to hear 100 different voices. You're not going to hear one voice. And you just have to remember that as a writer, to respect people. And if you do that, you know, it should come out all right.
What about the ideas themselves? I mean, you've written about big time drug dealers, small time drug dealers, cops, prostitutes. I don't think you're any of those things. Do you have cops and PIs and stuff who tell you stories, and you think that might work, or are you a voracious newspaper reader? How do you find out stuff that you turn into the capers?
Really, both of those things. I'm, big reader of the Washington Post. I get a lot of my ideas from there. Something might turn me on or make me angry. It's enough to write a book. And I have a lot of sources. In the beginning, it was a little tougher because, you tell somebody I'm writing my first book, will you talk to me? They're not really that interested. But
Right.
once you get a rep, you can get into the police department. You can ride around with private investigators. I go into all kinds of places in the city, and I go in with confidence and not fear. And honestly, one of the things that really opened a lot of doors for me was being a writer and producer on The Wire for
Yeah.
HBO,
I was going to ask you about that.
because that just gave me a lot of cachet. If I lead with that, people, they trust me and they want to talk to me.
Right. And The Wire's, as I recall, The Wire's viewership, The Wire's fan base was poorer Black viewers and college educated white viewers. And that's pretty reflective of DC, too.
Yeah, yeah, it ran the gamut. I mean, it was a new audience for HBO, and that's one of the reasons they kept us on the air, because our viewership numbers were very low, but they realized they were getting a new audience.
So you'd been a kid who wanted to get in the movies, and suddenly you're actually making, if not movies, then at least high end TV with David Simon. Did the writing for TV change the way you thought about writing novels?
I think so. It made me more disciplined. When you write a screenplay, it's dialogue and action,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't use the crutch of backstory, or you can't get into a character's head. And so I cut the fat on the novels going forward from there. And I think the writing is better, frankly, because I got more disciplined.
I want to ask you about, the DC we're in now, because I think so many of your great novels, starting with Hard Revolution, are set at these kind of moments, like hinge moments of change. The 68 riots most prominently. And I feel like we're at another moment of tremendous change. We have this president who's putting a stamp on Washington physically. We have this change in the kind of basic deal between DC and the people who come here to work for the government, where the sort of security and stability that was the core of that work is maybe never coming back. I'm wondering about this moment and how you approach it as a novelist.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I'm pretty optimistic. I'm probably more optimistic than the way you put it out there, because I think it is going to come back.
Hmm.
I think the government will rehire a lot of people, because the citizens will see that their services have become inferior in terms of health care and all of these things. It's instructive to remember that there have been wannabe dictators and fascist demagogues for as long as history. We just haven't experienced anything like
Right.
this. But those people will be gone, and so will the bootlicking minions who serve them. They're all going to be gone.
Well, so these moments of like big battle between like democracy and fascism or what have you, they often don't lead to great sort of nuanced literature about morally flawed, but ultimately just complicated people. Do you think this moment makes it harder to write about DC as a novel, or easier, or neither?
Not for me, because I stick to the people that if you talk to Washingtonians, I'm talking about generational
Mm-hmm.
Washingtonians, they're not as affected by this as people who had executive positions in the government and that sort of thing. They're kind of like, well, I'm going to wait for this ill wind to kind of blow out of town,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm still going to be here.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of people I write about.
I mean, when we did a survey ahead of the mayoral election, I forget exactly what the number was, but it was something, some very, very high percentage of Black Washingtonians had someone in their household lose a job as a result of the Doge era. And that's, lose your health insurance, lose your livelihood, lose your retirement.
Right, right.
Um,
It's
that's a
serious.
that's serious. And it's not, this is not Detroit in the sense that we never had like auto factories that closed.
That's our business here.
Yeah.
That's our industry. Um, and we're experiencing something like what's been happening in Baltimore for, 40 years
Yeah.
is people are really losing their jobs and their livelihood. And it echoes down the line because, you know, restaurants go out of business and all kinds of,
Mhm.
people in the service industry also lose their jobs.
Right.
But it will be better after November, I promise you.
I have a bit of good news to share from our sponsors at the DC Department of Behavioral Health, and that is that DC is turning a corner, and the numbers back it up. Fatal opioid overdose dropped 33% in this city from 2023 to 2024. Now, that is not just data, that's real people and real families that are still together. But listen, the work isn't done, and neither are we. If you or someone that you love is struggling, help is closer than you think. Text Live Long DC to 888-811 to connect with treatment, housing, and recovery support right here in the district. Free Narcan is available at nearly 40 locations across DC because nobody should lose someone for lack of access. And if you're in crisis right now, call or text 988. Know your worth, know your alternatives, know your value, know yourself. Recovery is possible. Find out how at knowyourpathdc.com.
So, as I mentioned, your new book brings back Derek Strange. For people who haven't read a lot of your work, can you give people a primer on the character and tell me where'd the inspiration come from?
The inspiration came from an event. There was several police shootings in one year where police officers accidentally shot other police officers. And there was an incident up in Boston where a black police officer in plainclothes wandered onto a crime scene, and the uniformed police converged on him and beat the hell out of him, and they never apologized. So that was the idea, was to create a character who had been a cop, was a private investigator now, and was hired by the mother of a slain police officer to figure out why he was killed, black police officer. I was really inspired by men I'd known my whole life who were older than me, black Washingtonians who had always sort of I've been friendly with, who'd taken me under their wing in certain situations, like coaches, older guys I worked with, that kind of thing. It's a man I knew,
Yeah.
a Washingtonian I knew. So I wrote these 3 contemporary novels with him back in 2000, 2001, 2002. And then I knew I was going to go back and write about him as a rookie cop on the streets during the 68 riots. I always wanted to write that book.
Mm-hmm.
It took me 12 books before I took it on. And in Hard Revolution, you meet him when he's 12 years old. So now I've written this book where he's in his 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my intention from the beginning was to describe this guy's life from the beginning to his sunset years. And now I've done it, and that's what The Blue Flame is. It's bringing him up to date. It's a kind of a complex case where he's involved with the police department too, because I was on a TV project for almost a year where the project fell apart, but I did a tremendous amount of research and I got myself embedded with DC's homicide branch.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as the project fell apart, as they often do, I had all this ammunition, man. I had all this information that I had been writing with homicide guys doing, for cases they were on, and murder scenes. And I was going to trials, murder trials, and that sort of thing. And I wanted to use it. So a lot of this book is from the POV of a homicide lieutenant, a woman named Angie Marinelli. And that's how it all came together.
Hey, I'm curious, so just a segue, when you're riding along with these homicide cops, had they heard of you? Had they read your stuff?
Some of them, they knew the TV stuff.
Uh-huh.
My last TV show was We Own This City, set in Baltimore, and it's about a corrupt squad of cops, the Gun Trace Task Force. And, usually police that I talk to, sometimes the first thing they'll say to me is, "You're not going to make me a dirty cop, are you?"
You ever gotten feedback from them on your characters and your storylines? Did they ever said like that nailed it, or you really missed it this time, Pelecanos?
I mean, I did a book called The Night Gardener 20 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
where I was also with Homicide back when they were behind the Penn Branch Shopping Center in Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast. I was only there for a few days, and I ran into those guys after the book came out, and they were like, how the hell did you do that? You didn't even ask us any questions, you know? I'm a good listener. I'm a good listener, and I observe, like, I'm not that interested in what forms they fill out or what they're doing on their computer. I'm really interested in, like, what the pictures they've got on their desk. And when I was writing that book, what really tripped me out is I'd be looking at a homicide detective's desk, and there were morgue photos up on the corkboard, you know, like women on slabs and shot and beaten to death and stuff. And right next to those photos, they had pictures of their kids.
Right.
And that kind of stuff fascinates me. The whole process does. And I got to say, man, the homicide department is really on it. When I started writing these books, the closure rate was something like it was something like 33% or 35%. It's now tremendously higher than that.
And the homicide rate itself is so much lower.
Yeah, which speaks to the big lie about this being a violent town that's been put out by our president. You know, you've got, just look around, you got the National Guard here, and they're standing around doing nothing because there's nothing for them to do.
What's Derek up to in this book?
He's trying to keep his life together. His wife has passed. He's kind of lonely. The only thing he's got is his work, and he continues to throw himself into it. One of the things that I've always repeated in the books is that he doesn't need that office on 9th and Upshur, but he keeps it because the kids at Roosevelt High School across the street can see him, a black man, turning the key on his business every day. He's an example to people.
And you had a little moment at the beginning of this one where he feels sort of ashamed that I think like a sign is out or something sort of looks faded. And he feels like these kids are going to look and think like there's a black man turning a key on something that's not as good as it should be.
That's right, but he can't, you know, the sign is figured in all the books. He's got this neon sign with strange investigations with like a magnifying glass over some of the letters. So some of the letters are bigger, but some of the neon is out now on the sign. And he's not making any money. He can't afford to fix the sign. He's a little ashamed of that. But he just keeps pushing, man. He keeps taking cases.
Can you give a quick overview of the sort of mystery, the quest at the core of the book?
Well, he's hired by a drug lawyer to represent a nonviolent marijuana dealer who's been incarcerated in the D.C. jail, who's also up on charges of murder charges. He didn't do it. He didn't do the murder. He freely admits that he's been dealing marijuana in bulk, but he's not a killer. So Strange, he meets his friends. It's a group of friends. They all grew up together over in North Michigan Park. And something's not right in this group of friends. One of them was killed. One of the friends is a young lady, and something happens to her that changes the whole book, and also changes Strange's sort of quest. He ends up taking this case for money, but the second case he takes is he just wants to find out what happened. He's curious. And the blue flame is what that expression means is once a cop, always a cop. You know, you've got the blue uniform, the blue flame never burns out.
So I want to turn back to your relation with DC for a bit, because it's, you know, even in the blue flame, like if you've got a marijuana dealer at the core of it, and we're now a city with sort of this quasi-legal weed situation. After all these years writing about DC, and you have written about like every street there is, what still surprises you or delights you?
It always comes down to the people, the humor of the people, and, you know, the ability to make me smile when I'm talking to people. It's that old thing, you know, whenever you meet somebody in DC, it's like, where'd you go to high school?
Yeah.
And then trying to learn new things myself. The reason a lot of this book is set in on that part of Northeast, which I call near Northeast, is because I had rarely written about it before, and I wanted to go into those neighborhoods and find out what was happening. I made a movie several years ago called DC Noir. It was based on my short stories. It's 4 different films in an omnibus. And one of the shorts that we did, we shot over on Taft Field over there on South Dakota and Otis Street, that area. I just was kind of like hanging out there and saying, I mean, I'm going to write about this someday. So I went back and did it.
Did you visit a lot before you wrote the book?
Yeah, I went and talked to people. I'd go over there. They have a football team, which is referenced in the book, that my sons played for the Tacoma Rams, and they used to play them down in Northeast. So I knew about that. But I'll give you an example. In the climatic event that kind of ends the novel, which it takes place in a house over there, I found the house I wanted, and then I went back at night and I walked the alley behind it, and I was taking pictures, but I made sure that you could approach that house stealthily at night, that particular house, and do an assault on it. So people are going to say, why? Like, what does he care? Because most readers don't care,
Right.
but I do.
The DC you saw, 1968, you're this kid delivering food for your parents' diner in a city that's just experienced this trauma. There's any number of times I'll run into, and I'm younger than you. I grew up in sort of 80s and 90s DC, but there's any number of times I will still like run across a stat or, hear from some college educated professional that, where they live in some neighborhood, those sorts of people never used to live before, where I feel like I am in a completely different city. What are the things that make you know, like, actually, it's still the same DC? Is there a tell?
I live in downtown Silver Spring. It's
Mhm.
actually, it feels like more of the city than some of the city does.
Yeah.
It's got a huge African population, Ethiopian, Eritrean. There's a lot of action around here, like, and the kind of thing that I like walking down the street at night and having your blood pulse a little bit, like, because something can happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to me, that's what being in the city's about. I don't want to be someplace where it's just too safe or too bland.
George, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to hear what you're up to next.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We will be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.